You're listening to The Exchange by Evolution, a melting pot of ideas and inspirations shared by some of the most successful technical leaders in the APAC region. I am Pearlie, Associate Consultant with Evolution Recruitment Solutions, and I help connect businesses with top tech talents. Today, I am your host. Just a disclaimer before we start the podcast, all thoughts and views spoken by the speakers or myself are purely representative of our individual opinions and not that of their company. Okay, so welcome to another installment of our podcast. And on today's podcast, we'll be discussing the topic of importance of data-driven decision-making for sustainability initiatives. I'm delighted to be joined by our esteemed speakers, Gustavo, Regional Director, Solutions and Tech at Google, and Prerit, Head of Applied Analytics at DHL. So for starters, Gustavo, would you like to introduce yourself and your background?
Sure, thanks for having me. My name is Gustavo Fuchs. I lead our technology team for Google Cloud and Asia Pacific. We have different practices within the technology team, and data is one of our most important practices. So we help customers in different areas such as database management, analytics, and AI, which I know is a very, very important topic. And sustainability is all about data. So that's where the things get together, and we are working with customers across industries on that. So thanks again for having me. Looking forward for the dialogue.
Thank you so much. That was a great introduction. So how about you, Prerit?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. Prerit Mishra. I head applied analytics within DHL. And my team primarily looks at customer-facing analytics. So a lot of work that we do is working with the customers to help them refine their supply chains, optimize their supply chains. And whenever we talk about supply chains, sustainability and analytics are the two major topics that come up. So yeah, happy to discuss that. And I love it that I'm doing this with Gustavo. He said sustainability is all about data, and I absolutely believe sustainability is a data play.
Perfect. So, we're really glad to have both of you here with us today. So let's jump right into the podcast questions. So, could you actually give a brief overview of how both of you got involved in data and sustainability field? Maybe, Prerit, you want to go first?
Sure. So I'm an engineer by education, by study, and my first job was about automation. From there, I got into the data field because we were trying to collect data from manufacturing equipments to improve or optimize those processes. And from there, I've never looked back. I think it's a very intriguing topic which touches across different types of technologies. And sustainability, last couple of years, I've been very active in this domain, and I think all of us should be thinking about it. Not just people from tech field or corporates. And I've taken a liking to it because I think I truly believe in, that we need to leave a better earth or a better environment for our generations to follow. So trying to do my best here, trying to see wherever I can add value.
Right. How about you, Gustavo?
I think I will probably give away how long I have been on that business. So probably, back in 1995 when internet became commercially available in many countries, databases were key to set up, let's say, the first set of websites, right? Which was the main tool that companies had to interact with businesses. So that's where I probably started my journey with data and databases itself. I think over the years, we had, the big phenomenon of digital transformation, which helped us frame many of the evolutions that we had in place. And the way I see is that sustainability is the new digital transformation. It's that Uber framework that is helping companies take the next step in terms of building their capabilities. First, they built to become digital. Now, I would say most of our businesses, especially because of the pandemic, they have reached a certain level of maturity on digital transformation. And the next stage is sustainability. It's how to build those capabilities with sustainability in mind. That's where we are operating today. And I think we are still in the beginning. There's a lot of effort. There's a lot of energy being put into that. But we're really in the beginning in terms of helping businesses not only better manage what they do today, but actually also help them build new capabilities with sustainability in mind. Because the processes might not be digital, or the processes might not have that parameter as part of their design previously.
That makes absolute sense. So thanks both for that. And just to deep dive a little, how can data exactly be used to drive sustainability initiatives, and how can that be measured? Their success be measured. So maybe Gustavo, you want to go first?
Sure. I think the number of use cases is probably unlimited at this point.
Yes.
And we are every day, every customer we're speaking
Yeah.
across different countries and different industries, we are discovering those use cases. I feel there are two, let's say, main themes in terms of leveraging data for sustainability. First, in terms of digital sustainability, which relates to how can you take your IT operations today and how can you actually quantify what those IT operations are generating in terms of data and sustainability. So the capabilities for that, companies now, they are operating their own data centers, or they are leveraging data centers from hyperscalers such as Google. How can they have the data to understand what is creating for them in terms of be it their scope 1 or 2 or 3 emissions? That's the first, I'd say, big theme. The second one is more around operational sustainability, which is as part of their day-to-day business. And it doesn't matter if they are in a financial services industry or they're a manufacturing company or an FMCG. As part of their value chain, how is data generated across this? How can we capture this data, and how can we analyze those processes to make more them efficient from a data perspective? Those are the two main pillars. Now the use cases on that are completely unlimited, and I think what we're trying to do is to create the most common parameters to help customers exchange ideas and probably bring experiences from one industry to another.
This is really clear, separating this broad idea into two main categories. Yeah. How about you, Prerit? What are your thoughts on this?
I look at it as two categories as well. I think pretty similar, but coming from a supply chain sort of a background, I think the first step is obviously collecting the data. So any operations, any industry, there's a need to baseline, and that happens with the data. The more data that you collect across the 3 different scopes, you can then baseline your operations, what the emissions are at this point of time. And that it doesn't necessarily have to be manufacturing, it can be any industry, banks. So knowing what my emissions are, and the next step would be optimizing, and this level of optimization can be in anything, right? Manufacturing, supply chain, transportation, distribution. Using data to then optimize my operations to reduce the emissions. So primarily 2 areas. One is monitoring. The second one would be optimizing operations or any sort of business, right? Those 2 areas, I would say, where data can add a lot of value. But then again, like Gustavo said, the use cases are unlimited, and each and every aspect that we start looking at and exploring, you can just keep going in further. And several examples from different industries, right? Banking industries, they are converting into paperless, less documentation, hence less sending mails, etc. We are switching to EVs. Just giving an example here, right? EV. So we're talking about switching to EVs, but what is the break-even point for your electric vehicle for the emissions compared to a diesel or a petrol vehicle, right? So do you need to run it for 30,000 kilometers? Do you need to run it for 70,000 kilometers where it gets even? Because you're still spending effort in manufacturing the vehicle. You're talking about batteries, you're talking about charging, recharging, which necessarily happens through fossil fuels, right? So, I mean, if you just start thinking about it, there's so many different levels and so many details, but it's all about data here.
That makes absolute sense. I think, our listeners would relate to a lot of these examples that you're giving to us as well. So thank you for that, Prerit. I guess, what do you think are some of the challenges and limitations of using data to drive sustainability initiatives in today's world? Maybe Gustavo want to go first?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of phenomena, right? One is because there is pressure from different set of stakeholders for businesses to adopt and drive sustainability. It could be from regulators, it could be from consumers, it could be from employees, it could be from stockholders and investors. Sometimes there is a risk of leading to what the market calls greenwashing, right? So there are initiatives that are driving sustainability, they are leveraging data, but they might not be reflecting the ultimate reality, right? So that's definitely one of the challenges. The pressure and the momentum to adopt sustainability under the broader framework of ESG is quite active. I think the pandemic has been changing a little bit of those dynamics, but it's a big pressure. So how can we ensure that those data points and this momentum, which is a very positive momentum, is used for good? I think that's a challenge. The second angle is there isn't yet, I would say, across industry, across country, region, continent, standard on leveraging all those data points. I think the closest we can get to that is the classification of scope 1, 2, or 3 emissions. But when you look deeper, it's still a lot of data transformation, data optimization. And until we get those standards developed, until we get those standards really well understood by the whole leadership team of the companies, right? Many companies, they have the chief sustainability officer, who sometimes, I would guess, probably feels very lonely in terms of getting that message across. It is definitely an ambassador role, but that needs to go to the next level. And that's where I feel it's very important. Many companies are reacting to sustainability, but I think the biggest opportunity is what additional business value can they create with sustainability? When they identify those use cases and that approach of creating a business differentiator versus reacting, that's where I think they can make the switch and start to potentially decrease some of those initial challenges.
I totally agree with that. A lot of times we should be proactive in our approach and not just reacting to what's happening around us, right? Okay, great. How about Prerit? What are your thoughts?
Industry standards, that definitely is a big challenge. Let me introduce a few terminologies at this point of time to make this a bit more.
Love it, please.
To help them. So, whenever we're talking about measuring CO2 or other greenhouse gas emissions, we talk about primary data and we talk about secondary data. So, for example, primary data would be that is the actual measurement. So, if I was manufacturing a glass, what was the total emissions that went into manufacturing this glass? So, all the suppliers of different components give me their real CO2 emissions data, and that gets captured, and then you finally see, I would take into account recycling if I were to, or disposal of this glass, and hence I can have, a carbon footprint of this product, a glass. So if everything is measured for this glass, it's primary data.
Right.
But the moment I start using standards that already exist, that means if this glass is material A and material A, there are existing databases where you can get this value of material A manufacturing emissions are these. That becomes secondary. That means we're not talking about this object. We are taking into account the standards that have been developed or benchmarked across different operations. The biggest issue that we have at this point of time is we don't have enough primary data. So even if a company does an analysis of their footprint, they may be able to do it with secondary data, and that tells me what, which side do I need to focus, or where do I actually have the most emissions in which area of the business, but it may not be accurate. So that, I think, is one of the bigger issues that we need to figure out. How do we use primary data? And that is not just a data problem, actually. We don't even know how to measure a lot of these things. There may or may not be devices that are ready for measuring. whenever we're talking about suppliers, especially small suppliers, they may not be at a IT a level where they can actually measure it, or they may not have enough funding to do this. So so it stems from the data collection issue, but it actually has a lot of different dimensions if you go deeper into it. So I would say that is one of the bigger issues, that people are saying this is my emissions, but how far it is in reality, we don't know actually. The other thing, industry standard plays such a big part. I mean, if I'm company A and company B has the same supplier, if I'm asking them for CO2 data in a particular format, and company B asks in a different format, that becomes a big issue for this particular supplier, which may be a small supplier. And we're talking about tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, which may get even smaller, right, in terms of how they operate. So not having a standard to actually communicate across different organizations, that is a big challenge, which, like Gustavo said, needs to be fixed by a lot of large organizations, probably some public bodies coming in and sorting this out. So I see that as the major challenge to get started on this journey of data and sustainability.
Right. So thank you both for sharing, all the challenges that there are. So obviously these are all really valid. And what do you think are some ways to mitigate these challenges or overcome it in the long run? Any ideas off the top of your head, maybe?
I feel governments and regulators play a big role here. If you look throughout Europe, some countries like Australia, New Zealand, where governments are taking the first step and they are driving the regulatory need for big companies to have those this type of measurement. They drive throughout the value chain through small suppliers. They set the tone, right? So when there is a regulatory, a government drive in terms of decreasing emissions and really operating in a sustainable way, I think they provide that really guidance throughout the industry. Probably what we need more is companies that operate across different, let's say, geographies, where that particular country might not be yet with the tone at the top. For them to take the next step. Right, to say, if a company is headquartered in Europe, and for example, if they operate in Southeast Asia, they're getting the guidance from Europe, they are already operating there. So maybe they can take this second step, which is to put in practices those standards, that methodology, and that drive, maybe throughout Southeast Asia, where some part of their value chain operates. That would be probably the two main thoughts I have in this area, but definitely I think governments are setting the tone, and many of the global meetings that are happening in this area are helping people get more interested to drive sustainability.
That makes sense. How about you, Prerit?
I think more than the government, I think the government has to play its part. I think the corporates need to come together as well. So again, this term is heavily used in technical forums, ecosystem, and partnerships. But I truly believe that the only way to solve this, or even attack it, attack this problem, is through building an ecosystem, building partnerships. So exchange of the data across different entities, across different businesses, policy would play a big part. And corporates coming together, right? If the example that I gave, multiple suppliers, they are providing to different kinds of companies. These companies need to agree on a particular format or a particular way of presenting this, getting this data from the suppliers. Once that happens, it becomes a lot easier. The other thing that I would say is if we start looking at it as additional value creation, right? Not just tackling it as a problem, but looking at it from a value creation perspective, then these problems also may get tackled. So example here being, it's very costly to get started with sustainability. It is very costly to get all these different players together and get them to work together. Corporates may lose competitive edge. But if we start looking at it from a different value proposition, where these corporates come together and unlock a different sort of value, even if it means different kind of a business, then they have something to offset, this threat as such. And that has happened in our industry itself. It has happened where competition has come together to create something that they're working together to unlock business value. And I think that's the entrepreneurial approach that needs to be taken to tackle this as well, I would say. So those things would be my inputs.
Yeah, awesome. Those are really, really insightful. We should definitely take those to heart. Okay, and to wrap up this discussion, we'll end it off with a more exciting question. In your opinion, what are some of the more or most exciting developments or potential uses of data in the sustainability field? Maybe Prerit, you would like to go first?
Sure. I think baselining and measurement, definitely. There are lots of startups, there are lots of corporates that are doing it themselves, but there are lots of startups here that are playing in this area of carbon monitoring and baselining. I think the other thing, which is not directly connected to data, is an area where we talk about offsets. There's green carbon, there's blue carbon, but accurate methods are required, or accurate solutions are required to measure these solutions, right? If the soil is actually retaining carbon, and for how long, and when we say it is for 20 credits, does it actually stay as 20 credits? So there are companies that are doing these measurements as well, and then they keep this data live. There are carbon trading platforms that are available, which help larger corporates do offsets. So I would say, and then there are certain companies that are talking about optimizations, right? Especially in logistics and supply chain, we talk about optimizations a lot. If we are able to switch air freight to ocean freight, then that reduces cost most of the times, and also reduces carbon emissions. And there are organizations that are already relying on these modes, which is routing optimization. So if I can do the picks and collections in the most optimized way, that my timing is the shortest. And if we in the future, if we switch to electric vehicles, then where are the battery charging stations, and is my route optimized completely according to this? We talk about consolidating orders, so optimizing what goes on in a truck or a container, as well as on the plane. So I would say that optimization would bring us, it's not right to say that reducing sustainability or reducing carbon emissions is always going to reduce our cost, but we have seen use cases where that happens, and this cost can then be used to this savings can then be invested into other green measures. So I would say definitely optimization space, measuring space. I do believe that we need standards, and within that, the carbon trading, carbon offset measurement, these would play a big part as well. And this is where I see heavily use of data very heavy.
Awesome. So we have baselining, carbon trading, as well as optimization. So for Gustavo, what do you think are some of the future developments?
There are two things I'm very excited about.
Right.
So maybe I can hold it on that. I think, everything we talked about, it's all about, let's say, data that our businesses produce.
Right.
And then, of course, we are channeling, we are designing, transforming, and optimizing this data towards sustainability. That is an additional parameter, which for me is a game changer, that historically has been very much restricted to NGOs, researchers, governments, which is to use geospatial data towards sustainability, right? I know there's a lot of discussion on things in the sky, and we do have a lot of satellites that capture Earth data over time, right? And those capabilities, which we use as consumers, be it for Google Earth or Maps, they are now available since mid last year to commercial institutions, to businesses, to leverage this and actually augment this to their value chains. So if I pick an example, for example, like an FMCG company that maybe operates across the world and has, let's say, palm plantations in Indonesia, they can attest that the palm they are sourcing for their products, sustainable products, is being sourced in a sustainable way. And this data it's a real data, right?
Yeah.
It's being captured from up in the sky in terms of how the reforestation and how sustainable that is. So that for me is a very exciting development, and I think we're really just scratching the surface. The second one, and according to Prerit's comment, the ecosystem, right? So Google has and builds many technologies, but I think our biggest job is to build ecosystems. And although we do have some of the propositions ourselves, we have a big network of partners. So late last year, we announced a marketplace for sustainability partners that companies like DHL, companies that are very focused on a specific segment of the business, be it logistics or value chains, supply chains, they can come and provide their solutions across the globe, right?
Wow.
So it really enables local partners, regional partners, global partners to go and provide those perspectives. We have a company, for example, that's headquartered in Australia, providing those solutions around climate risk and resilience across the globe. So those are the two areas I feel more excited about currently, because there is unlimited potential to reach and help many businesses across the world.
Right. Wow, I couldn't hold my excitement as well. I feel so educated today. Thank you both. Okay, so all right, we'll leave it here today as that's all the time that we have. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank both speakers once again for providing your knowledge and insights to the topic. And thank you everyone for listening. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.